Good morning, everyone. It's good to see everyone this morning. We'll just kick off straight into the lesson. I don't think we have any song folks lined up yet, so it'll be okay. It's good to see everyone this morning. I have both the Bible class and the sermon today. We will build off of Bible class of the same lesson. I promise folks who didn't hear the Bible class won't be lost. It'll be okay. We'll make it through. We're going to look at the parable of the sower this morning. If you want to go ahead and turn to Matthew chapter 13 and keep a finger there. Hope everyone is doing well this morning. So the parable of the sower here in Matthew chapter 13, I love this idea and this imagery, right? Because I get this picture of you as the farmer, as the sower, and your father has given you this property. You've got this bunch of land, right? But it's not like, here's 2 acres, good luck. Like you have an untamed wilderness. I think like Midwest, right? You're standing on like an outcropping. You're overlooking everything in front of you, right? And you have a brook bubbling by right in front of you. And you're not standing like, I don't picture it standing on top of like the mountain or something. I picture it like just a small rise, right, on the edge of the brook bubbling by you. And you've got the plains around you. And over here you've got the forest and the woodlands, right? And in the back you can see the mountains climbing up, right? I see you're just on this land like out in the Midwest, and you're there. And your father's given you this land. And he's like, all right, look, this is yours. I need you to do something with it. I need you to work it. I need you to make it profitable. I want you to turn this into a lush, fruitful area, right? As you stand out looking over this, you notice all the land, but you also notice the animals. And the animals are wild, right? It's not your cat and your dog. Some animals will try to consume all the work that I do, right? Some of the birds, the deer, just all the stuff that's going to try to eat the seed, or even after I sow the seed and it starts to grow up, then the animals will come through and graze and eat it, right? How many people are here are gardeners? This means yes. This means no. This means I'm not sure. Gardening is when you take something and you put it in the ground and pray it grows. That's as far as I've gotten. I'm not good at it, right? Some people have green thumbs. You can give Emily something that looks very dead, and you're like, there's no way, right? And she can make this thing grow against its will, apparently, right? I can keep people reasonably alive. I'm decent at that. Emily can keep plants alive. If you want to keep a plant alive, don't come to me. I'm the wrong guy. I'm very good at killing plants. I'm not very good at keeping them alive or making them live even when they don't want to. But that's our job, right? And some of those animals will come through, and even whenever you first sow the seed, we just put some grass seed down. And so we had to cover it up with straw so it doesn't get blown away, and so that the birds don't come down and eat it, right? Even little insects can come along and steal seed that you've scattered. Some of the animals don't care about the seed, though, and they don't care about the sprouts that spring up once you finally see to meet some success. Some of those animals are after me, right? Some of those animals don't care about all that stuff. Out in the Midwest, you've got mountain lions, and you've got wolves, and you've got bears. Lions and tigers and bears, oh my, right? So some of those animals don't care about the crop. They care about you, the sower, right? So here you are, and I stand alone on this outcropping overlooking this land, and I see all of these things. And the parable begins, right? Matthew chapter 13, starting the second half of verse 3. A sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured them. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where some 60, some 30. He who has ears, let him hear. Go to verse 10. Am I dead? I can yell loud enough. It just can't hear me enough, dude.
Evidently, you can't keep that alive either.
I told you, I'm not the one. There's a green light bulb on this one, that's enough to count as green apparently. I think I'm back online. Yes, I can hear you rattling this thing around, so I'm good. So that's not even a plant. I can't keep it alive either. Continuing in verse 10, so that is the parable, right? That's the meat. That's what's going on. That's what happens. That's our image. That is the parable right there. But the reason for the parable begins in verse 10 here. And I'm reading from the English Standard Version, the ESV. Then the disciples came and said to him, "Why do you speak to them in parables?" And he answered them, "To you," that is the apostles here, "it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. For the one who has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. This is why I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. Indeed, in their case, the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled that says, 'You will indeed hear but never understand, and you will indeed see but never perceive. For this people's heart has grown dull, and with their ears they can barely hear, and their eyes they have closed, lest they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their heart and turn, and I would heal them. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For truly I say to you, many prophets and righteous people long to see what you see, and did not see it, and to hear what you hear, and did not hear it.'" These are the wild lands, right? This message is so simple and so obvious that you have to force yourself not to see it or hear it. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 14. Will somebody catch that for me? 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 14. Whoever gets there first. First.
Natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him, neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned.
So it's about focus, right? Where's your focus? These spiritually discerned things, the natural person does not accept it because they're foolishness or folly to him. He's not able to understand them because you have to be of a spiritual mindset to discern them. So that natural person can't do that, right? So they've blocked their minds. They've decided not to have a spiritual discernment, not to think of spiritual things, and they have chosen not to be able to see it, not to be able to hear it. Romans chapter 1, verses 18. Well, we're not going to read that whole thing. In Romans chapter 1, starting at 18 and going through chapter 32, verse 32. I've not had all my coffee yet. I would suggest reading through this. I'm not going to take the Bible class time to do so, right? But it talks about man and they're just not wanting to hear it, not wanting to see it, right? The Word of God. And some key takeaways from these verses is, for what can be known about God is plain to them. Why? Well, it's because God has shown it to them. So whatever you need to know about God, it's plain, it's obvious, because God has shown it to them. I believe that was verse 19. It says they are without excuse. You can't say that, well, I know. There's no well, I. God said, I've shown you everything. I've told it to you. What can be known about me is obvious. You have no excuse. And it goes through all these things and all the things that they did. And the worst part is then they did not see fit to acknowledge God, right? So you have to actively choose to ignore God. He's given you everything you need right there in front of you. He's shown it to us, just like the Romans. He didn't give the Romans some kind of magical thing, right? Just like the Romans, He's given us nature. He's given us the Bible. He's given us teachers. He's given us all the things that we need to be able to see and understand there is a God and to seek after Him. And once we start to seek Him, to find Him. He's given us everything we need. So you have to actively choose to ignore God. You have to intentionally close your eyes and ears. And it makes me think of Stephen in Acts 7, verse 57. when Stephen is done, well, it's not even when he's done. While Stephen is preaching, right, the end result is what? They took him out back and stoned him, right? But in that interim between the stoning and them stopping his lesson, what did they do? Whenever Stephen was still going, but the people gathered there before they stoned him, they started gnashing at him with their teeth, but you ever seen or when you were a little kid, right? Your brother or sister's pestering you or whatever you're doing, and you don't want to hear any more of what they're doing, and so they let go, blah, 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 and they plug their ears, blah, 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 right? It says that they plugged their ears while they were gnashing their teeth at him. I don't know if they're necessarily actually trying to bite him physically. They're enraged and weird, so possible. But certainly they were like, like their anger. They're baring their teeth. They're chomping at the bit. They're gnashing their teeth at him. They're grinding their teeth so they don't have to hear him. And they're closing their eyes. They're literally hiding their eyes and closing their ears so that they won't hear Stephen's message anymore, because it's not Stephen's message, right? Stephen's message wouldn't matter, but the Lord's message, now that's much more powerful. It's sharper than a two-edged sword, right? That's what I think of. So when you have to actively choose to ignore God, you have to be like those people who took Stephen out and stoned him. You have to literally just plug your ears up and start going, bah, 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 and yelling and just refusing to see it, because you can't deny it. It is all around you all the time. And the people that are around us, in the things that are around us, and the many blessings that we have, right? On the opposite side, though, it tells us what we have to do to be healed on a very basic level, right? So what does it say? What does God say that we need to do here back in Matthew chapter 13, 10 through 17, that explanation of why he's speaking in parables, right? What does he say that, what do they need to do? As an individual, as a group of people, what do we need to do to be able to be healed? Open your eyes and ears. Right? Don't do like the people with Stephen did. Instead of screaming and closing your eyes and covering your ears, stop. All you have to do is be at peace and stop actively ignoring God, and you can find that faith, right? And God can heal you. I like the explanation of the parable in Luke's account. So if you will, please turn with me to Luke chapter 8. It's the same parable. I just like the way Luke's pen wrote it down for the explanation. So you have the parable, like the meat, the actual what happens, and then you have the reason Jesus speaks to them in parables. And then you have the explanation of the parable. So in Luke chapter 8, we're going to start in verse 11. Now the parable is this. The seed is the word of God. The ones along the path are those who have heard, and then the devil comes and takes away the word from their hearts, so that they may not believe and be saved. And the ones on the rock are those who, when they hear the word, receive it with joy, but these have no root. They believe for a while, and in time of testing, fall away. And as for what fell among the thorns, they are those who hear, but as they go on their way, they are choked by the cares and riches and pleasures of life, and their fruit does not mature. As for that on the good soil, they are those who, hearing the word, hold it fast in an honest and good heart, and bear fruit with patience. So our Bible class today is this, the problems with the soil. And our sermon today, this morning, will be the problems with the sower. Okay? So, Bible class, problems with the soil. What is the soil? In general, right? I said we're standing on our land and we have all this soil in front of us. Yes, on an individualistic way, but if we group all those pieces of soil together, all the soil is what? The whole world, right? It's the whole property, everything we've got, everything that God has given us to go sow. How much has God given us to sow? Land-wise. Everywhere. Was there anywhere God's like, everywhere except for Madagascar? I don't like them. No, right? Unto all the world and preach the gospel. So whenever we sit down, it's every piece of land Preach it to every creature, right? He who has ears, let him hear. That's how he ends the parable. So we don't have an area of spot that's barren. We don't have an area or a spot that we're not supposed to sow seed on, right? So, but we just talked about, we have all these different types of soil on our land, right? Whenever we're talking about standing on that little outcropping and the brooks going by, and you get the plains over here and the mountains up in the background and the forest over there. As the farmer, what's my biggest problem with the soil?
It's hard, and it grows weeds.
Some of it's hard. A lot of it grows weeds because of its,
Like the new soil,
even the new soil.
new ground.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're trying to break straight through.
Yeah, that's the term that farmer uses. Gonna break new ground today.
And it's a process, isn't it? The biggest problem as the rancher is I can't.
I was gonna say, it would seem like there are things that once you plant the seed are not in your control anymore. If they're watered enough, that's one main thing, if they're getting the water, getting the nurturing that they need to grow. If the ground has the right nutrients in it, if it has the fertilizer or it has the proper balance of nutrients, then it will grow. But that's not universal and it's not always the same all the way across. So those are the two things, the quality of the soil and the rain or those things give life.
All right. I like it. What, I'm going to start a saying and you just give me the last word. Life's not fair. Life's not fair, right? So as you look out and you look out over all the soil, did God say, all right, look, what I want you to do is I want you to, here's a map. I want you to choose. Is it like Abraham and Lot, right? When he was like, all right, when Abraham said, all right, pick a side, right? Did God give us a map and say, all right, look, do you want this choice piece of property or do you just want the whole world, right? Because he gave us all of it. And in the world, there's all sorts of soil, right? So the biggest thing that I need to acknowledge, so we're looking at problems with the soil here in class, right? So the biggest thing that I need to acknowledge as the sower is I can't control the soil. Say it with me. I cannot control the soil. I cannot control the soil. You can't. Okay? Can't do it. I can't control that the brook is right there when I walk up, and I can't control that there's a forest over there when I walk up. That it is what it is. I can't help that. Right? Now, as a farmer, we can break that new ground. We can work and we can add nutrients to the soil, right? I can work to change the soil. I can work to make that soil where it is profitable. I can work to keep the weeds out of the soil, right? But when I walk up to that soil and look at it, whenever I first start to do something with it, I can't change what it is. I can't control what I'm starting with. And God didn't say, don't worry about the rocky stuff. And God didn't say, don't worry about the dry ground. A sower went out to sow. This is the land that he's on. God gave him a job. I'm the sower. I'm standing on the land. And I have a job. But as soon as I stop trying to control what kind of soil that I'm starting on or what kind of soil is around me, I'm going to have a lot easier time. You look at this and you're like, this sower is doing a horrible job. This is the worst farmer I've ever seen in my life. This poor guy can't stop. He's just, does he have a hole in his bag? What's going on? Everywhere he goes, he's just losing seed everywhere he went. Why in the world would this sower drop seed on the path? It doesn't make sense. The path is too hard, right? Think about people, right? Now let's get more to an individualistic thing for us, right? That path, it's too hard. It never even considers the word. The seed falls down, it bounces around, it never even gets close, right? It doesn't even find. How many people in the world is this path that you try and you're like, hey, this is the best news. You're lonely, you're sad. I'm telling you, I got something for you. I have the best news. You don't have to be lonely and sad. There's a place where you belong. There's people love you. There's a reward. There's something more than this life. Just let me talk. Just listen. Just come on. Let's study. Find out with me. And it just goes. How many people in the world is that? Do you think that's everybody? Do you think that's or do you say like that's nobody? I think we're splitting it 50-50. How many people do we honestly think are the path? Not how many. Maybe. How many people do we feel like are the path? Right? And because this is everybody, what's the point? Right?
There won't be any crop if you don't plant something. Like I said, I travel a lot. I see the cotton fields down in South Georgia. They've had a rough year with the hurricanes and all that kind of stuff. But the way they sow that field, when they sow it, you're talking about many hundreds of acres. You'll see spots as you look out across it as it produces, as it grows. Some is very strong. The edges are very weak. They don't care about the edges as far as they want it sown, but it's production. We have to sow the whole thing regardless.
Right.
They do that with the harvesting and with the sowing of the seed.
Right. Because they've worked the soil, but to a degree, even after they've worked the soil, right? Where's the most fertilizer? Where's the most work? Where's the most nurturing, watered, best conditions? Where are they at? Are they on the outside, on the very edge of the field, right by the road? Are they right there in the middle of the field where all of those things overlap multiple times, and that's just where the most work has been done, right? So, but I can't control the soil. Is there someone who can control the soil? The soil, yeah, that person itself, right? So as the sower, I want us to be, our takeaway from Bible class is I want us to say, okay, that's the soil. It is what it is. But I'm a sower. So what am I going to do?
I'm gonna try to make it better.
Well, yes, but immediately, even as I'm working that soil, even as I'm trying to nurture that soil, what am I going to do? What am I commanded to do, no matter what that soil is doing? Sower, right? I'm a sower. I'm going to sow. So even while I'm working, even while I'm tilling, right? So even as you're transporting, like think about that farmer. I said he's the worst farmer ever. Does he have a hole in his bag everywhere he goes? He's just falling out, right? So even as he's transporting the seed to try to get it where he needs it, he's leaving seed behind because he's told to sow. God said, go sow, so he is. He looks at it and he knows there's seed on the path. But God said sow, so he sowed it on the path too. Right? So we think this is everybody, though, so we don't try. But I want to share a thought, maybe you've had, maybe you've not. As we were just talking, that souls can change. We can work that soil, and we'll talk more about that in our lesson as well. But the soil can be improved. Can. The scary part to that, though, is that the soil can also lose. Any type of soil, no matter how dark and rich it is, every single one of these types of soil can become the path. My hunters, what do you see when you're in the woods and you're looking for where critters have been? What do you find? You find a game trail. Why is that game trail there?
That's the path they've chosen.
So they just walk the same path. You know, it's the same set of, they make little roads, right? Why does nothing grow on these guys? And that's how we find them, right? Is you go out in the woods and you just kind of, up. There's a path. Nothing is growing right here for like, you got a section that's like this tall, about that wide. It just I can literally get on it and walk it and follow it. Someone's made a path right there. I'm in the middle of the woods. There's plenty of leaves rotting to give nutrients to the soil. There's plenty of water. There's plenty of everything. Why in the world does nothing grow on this path right here? Over and over and over again. Right? Every type of soil can become the path. If you can have a path of just small creatures in the woods, how much more so if we, as big, clunky humans, start walking around, right? If we choose a path and we walk it, you'll see on the side of the road where there's no sidewalk, what's there? There'll be a strip of dirt where people walk because it's packed down. There's no grass growing there. It's repeatedly trodden. It's not cared for. But if we don't try, you understand that everything is lost. We see the path and we see the hard soil and we think that this is everybody because every time we try, that's what it feels like. It just skips right off and keeps on going, right? But I tell you that most of those people probably didn't start off as the path. Most of those people probably started off as decent soil. We probably could have reached them at some point in their lives, but their life experiences, maybe even with people in the church, shame on us sometimes, right? But sometimes we mess up even when we're trying as hard as we can, and sometimes we accidentally turn people away too, right? So no matter what we do, if we don't try to catch those people, right? If we can catch them earlier before that soil becomes the path, before it gets packed down and trodden on, right? If we can catch them before that, it's so much easier. But understand that if you don't try and try to get those other people before they're the path, they will become the path. If they don't receive that nutrients, if they don't receive that care, if they don't receive that love, then they will eventually get to the point where they're the path, right? The rest of the other three make me think of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, right? So this is the seed doesn't just skip off. The seed lands and it actually does something. Right? What's our next one? We have the rocks, right? What's up with the rocks? What happens? The seed lands, and then what? And then in times of trial, something comes along, the sun beats down on it, right? And what happens to that tree, that product that's growing? What is that? What is that heat, right? So you as the sower, you've sown the seed. And here's the other thing about this. Looking at the soil, you can't tell, right? Now I can look at it and see that's a path. Sometimes I can say that's a path. I think in my mind, right, everyone's a path. That's what we just talked about. That's why I don't want to try on anybody, because that's just how everybody is anyway. It's not going to work. But looking at the soil, I don't know. I don't know what's under there, right? I don't know if I'm going to find Stone Mountain if I start digging underneath that soil. I don't know if it's going to be fantastic soil all the way. I don't know if I'm going to run into that Georgia red clay we have about 2.5 inches deep in any kind of soil we have around here, right? I don't know. I can look at it and I see that there is soil, and that's all the information that I have, right? So you sow the seed and it lands, and then this just comes up, and you're having success, and there's studies, they're converted, right? But then what happens to them? The sun. But what is the sun? What is the imagery here that we have? And I don't know if there's I can't tell you that there's necessarily a perfect answer here. I think we can take this several different ways. But let's just explore each type of soil together. Right.
Sunlight is necessary to some degree, but when you get beat down by too much of the heat of the day, very shallow in spirituality. Have a very shallow, spiritual attitude about themselves. Have no interest in religious things. They'll hear the Lord. They may respond to it initially, but because of their shallow spiritual nature, they find other, reasons to just give up and die.
Spot on, right? I like that. People are spiritually shallow, right?
Sun represents righteousness, wickedness, things of the world.
Perhaps.
You mentioned about the putting hay out if you're trying to grow grass or something in your yard. Well, that hay does two things. Prevents birds from eating it, but also creates a thermal heat that supports the seeds as they start to grow. And you have to put hay out or some kind of straw out to prevent direct sunlight, but you still want that thermal heat to cause the seed to germinate and grow.
Right. Yes. Right? And that's the lessons we've taken away from this, like, our whole lives, right? That's the straightforward, absolutely correct answer. Absolutely. As a Christian, though, what can be my warning to this? Because this person's a Christian, right? The path, scoop, not a Christian. Everyone else, it grew. That means Christian, right? So what's my takeaway as a Christian? Is there an amount of sunlight that no depth of soil can support? It doesn't matter how good the soil is and how deep down it goes. Is there an amount of sunlight that can burn it out? Do you see any mighty oak trees in the desert? Could I take all of the great soil that I need and plop it in the middle of the desert and run it as deep as I can get it to go and put a giant oak tree in the middle of the desert? Would that tree survive? No, because there's a point at which, no matter how, there's a point at which it's too shallow, right? Because if we expose ourselves to that much sunlight, to that much heat, that many problems, there's a point at which, no matter how deep my soil is, it can't be supported, right? So we have to be careful. There's another way that this can go too, I think, right? So they're Goldilocks and three bears. This is the too hot, too cold, and just right situation. This is the two hots. Is it possible to be too hot, that your zeal can burn out for Christ? So yes, absolutely, you have to be careful of the depth of the soil. The trials of the world can be the sunlight, right? But also, can we expose ourselves too much? Can we jump in too hot, too fast as a fresh Christian, and then our depth of soil, we didn't realize what we needed, right? We didn't build that soil around it, and we just jumped in as hot and fast as we can. And we see that sometimes the ugly side of it with some the truths that we have to deal with, the changes we need to make, right? Can we burn ourselves out? Can your zeal grow cold?
Yeah, we've seen it too many times.
Right? So even when you're trying not to, though, right? Even if it's not necessarily sin that comes along initially and burns you, right? Maybe you're out there and you're trying to do all this good stuff and you're trying to do this, and maybe sometimes it's not working out, maybe sometimes this, maybe sometimes we can burn ourselves out, right?
I've always thought Jesus taking himself out of just the hustle and bustle of his ministry and taking time for himself to pray away from the crowd is a lesson maybe that we overlook, because us in this room, we love to work, and the more the better. And sometimes, like you're pointing out, I think you're right about that. We can burn out if we're not careful and not be as effective as we could be.
Another thing to consider is the same sun that was shining on this rocky soil was also shining on the good soil. And the difference in the way you receive that sun, the thing that's, some things are just part of life, they're necessary.
Right.
Without some, when people are healing, what's a product of what people have had surgery? What do they do almost when they have surgery? They try to get them up, get them moving. Why? Put a little stress on them, right? That stress is necessary to help the body start to heal. Well, as we grow as Christians, we're going to face some adversity. We're going to face some heat. We're going to experience the sun. You know, that's something that we're supposed to persevere through to help us grow. But there's those who will not, because of the shallowness of their spirituality. They will not endure the same adversity that you will. They'll just give up, they walk away, that's it.
And not everyone's going to endure the same amount of adversity either necessarily, right? We will all endure some. Some people will endure different ways, but we all will face persecution, right? We all need to be in Christ. So the lesson, I think, from this as Christians is just to be careful.
I heard with the recent hurricane in South Georgia, when a hurricane comes through farms, a lot of times the farmers will just give up and the suicide rates go up in the farmers. We can't give up when our crops aren't growing. And that's what I'm kind of getting out of this. The sower can also get burned up from not getting enough sun and water.
Absolutely. Well, those animals, right? Those wild animals. You're out there too. You got to take care of yourself. But there's wild animals that'll come out there and try to get you, right? They're not concerned in the product. They don't care about destroying the product. They care about the guy who is trying to produce that product. They're going to come. Satan's not dumb. He's going to come for you, right? That's what those wild animals are, is Satan.
Also, he said it just right, that sometimes the strongest, best soil does tend to get burned out on replanting. Well, what's the use of replanting? It doesn't come out right. I don't get the production off of it that I need to pay for next year's crop.
Yeah.
So, you see fields going without being replanted, not being properly rotated. Just, I don't care anymore.
Right.
And God instruct Israelite nation to let the soil rest, every 7 years?
That's
That's
the 17th.
instructive, should be for us.
And we've adapted that too to crop rotations, right? Growing different things that require different nutrients. Let's finish this class up real quick in the next 2 minutes, right? We have the thorns, which are too cold, right? These folks are too cold. This is good soil, just like on top of the rocks is good soil. Now this is deep enough, but the problem with this is that the word that you put there is not the only thing that's there, right? Like Peter. Peter says, well, Lord, if it is you, let me come out. And he hops out of the boat and he starts jogging across the water, hey, and then he's like, oh, it's windier out there. And he starts to sink, right? That's these folks. That's what happens. But unlike Peter, they don't look up and say, help me. They're like, oh, bye. And they're gone, right? That's these people. They're good soil. They had everything going on, but there's too much competition in their heart. They didn't give it over. Now, as a Christian, what's my lesson for that? I can have too much competition in my heart too, right? At any point, these weeds can spring up. It's not like, oh, I have good soil, I've put down some weed and feed, I'm going to be fine. It's not. No. You have to continue to work the soil. You have to continue to keep the weeds out, right? And that's all this is other competitions. You can phrase it however you want to. You can phrase it as idolatry. You can phrase it as, well, I need my children, school and sports and band and what's pick your X, Y, or Z, right? What's the competition, right? Well, I can't come to that event because I've got what? What in our lives is more important than the church and the fellowship with the members of the church? Jesus is the most important, right? So that's our lesson here on the thorns, is just as Christians, we need to be careful because those weeds can always come up. We need to always be watching and weeding the soil so that our hearts, which is that good soil, can grow the product, right? And then lastly, we have the good soil. This is the soil so everybody's the path, so we don't try. This is the good soil. This is the one that we tell ourselves doesn't exist, right? We think it doesn't exist, so we don't try. We don't try because on all of our other attempts, we've had the person that's too hot, too cold, or the path, and we just have had no success, right? But remember that we have no way to know what kind of soil each person is. And we can help change what kind of soil they are, but we cannot control what we start with, right? We cannot control the soil. Looking forward to our sermon this morning will be the problems with the sower. It's the problems with me, right? I can't blame the soil. At some point I have to acknowledge that it is what it is. That's the point of this, right? The soil is what it is. I'll have to start working on me instead. We'll study that.